Good morning. Welcome to RUC'S United Church on Sunday, September 13th. Today we start our in-person church services once again, but I'm also going to provide you on this video every Sunday morning and through the week with a copy of my reflection. So it's actually Friday morning, and Sid and I are recording my reflection now that I'm going to give in person on Sunday morning. We want to make sure that if you don't feel comfortable coming to church yet, or you're not able to come, you still get to hear the reflection and feel like you're with us. And also, today I am starting the big Bible adventure at RUC'S United Church. And I'm going to get to that in a minute. But first, let's picture that it's a hot August afternoon in Milan, Italy. It is humid, and the drowsy bees are buzzing away in the afternoon flowers. The sun is just starting to set, but it is still hot and quiet. You know those late, sunny afternoon feelings that we get. A young man in his early 30s is lounging in a chair. He's exhausted physically from a hard day work, but he's also exhausted emotionally and intellectually and spiritually. He's been trying to grapple with an idea of whether or not he should embrace this brand new religion that's spreading called Christianity, because it's the mid-300s, and this young man's name is Augustine. Augustine, or Augustine, depending on which you like, wanted to live a more meaningful life, a life that was grounded in some kind of foundational moral values that would hold him steady in the difficult times. But he wasn't sure that Christianity was really the way to go. And on this hot, hot afternoon, as he lay there tired in body and soul, he suddenly heard a voice that said, "Pick it up and read." And Augustine reached down and picked up what happened to be the letters of the Apostle Paul. In fact, it was the letter that Paul wrote to the Romans, and he read this passage there in the mid-300s on that hot Milan afternoon. And all of a sudden, he felt his life changing. He felt energy coursing through his body. He jumped to his feet and began to live transformed. So what exactly did Augustine read that day? Well, it wouldn't have been quite exactly what we read today. Paul's letter to the Romans, as it existed in that time, may be different than what we have, because we don't have originals of any of the Bible. In fact, Augustine didn't have either. He had fragments, he had copies of copies of copies that may have been changed between the time it was written by Paul in about 30 AD and the time it reached him 250 years later. But what he read was enough to galvanize him into a different way of life. And that's what the Bible has done for people ever since. In the next 66 weeks, well, give or take a few, taking time off for Advent, taking time off for Lent, taking time off for vacation, taking time off for special occasions, I'm going to go through every single one of the books of our Bible with you. We're going to start in Genesis next week, taking a couple weeks for some books and maybe sliding through the prophets a little faster. But we're going to cover every single book of the Bible. I think the great Bible adventure is going to take us 2 years, maybe, give or take. But I think this is really worth doing, because the books of the Bible have galvanized people over history. They have changed people's lives, and they still form, in many ways, our foundational sense of moral values. But what I want to talk about this morning, besides Augustine, is what is the Bible that we're reading? Well, historically, we know that it's a collection of letters and stories and parables, most of which we don't know who wrote them, and none of which we have an original form, that were collected together for Christians sometime in the 300s and that have changed over time and change again every time someone translates them. But we also know that this is a book which people read in different ways. So my topic today really is, what Bible did Augustine read? What Bible are we reading? A lot of people don't like the Bible, and I completely get that. It has been used in horrific ways over time, and for many of us, it just feels like a rule book. Marcus Borg, who's a wonderful modern-day theologian, suggests, though, that there's two different ways that we can consider reading the Bible. One he calls the earlier way, and it's the one that I grew up with. The earlier way of reading the Bible is to see the Bible as literal. The Bible as literally having written by God, the Bible as unchanging, and the Bible as finite in its authority. Now, if you ascribe to that earlier way of reading the Bible, the one I grew up with, you're most likely going to approach the Bible as an instruction manual. It's going to give you answers to your questions. It's going to tell you that if you behave in a certain way, you're going to get a certain thing. The way I was raised with the Bible was I was taught that it was kind of an action and a reward system. So if I behaved well, God would reward me. And that's still a very prevalent way of understanding reading the Bible. If we do what God says, everything will work out. In fact, some churches will go further and say, if we do what God says, we will experience prosperity, physical prosperity in this time, in our lives, and after our lives, we will be taken into heaven for an even more and endless prosperity. That's one way to read the Bible, as I say. It's an instruction manual, and it's about actions on our part and reward from God. Now, I have to confess that when I was growing up, I began to find that a very problematic way to read the Bible. Problematic for so many reasons. One was I saw lots of really good people who tried really hard to follow the moral teachings of the Bible, and their lives did not prosper. Things did not go well for them. Sometimes terrible things happened. I couldn't understand how the reward system worked when clearly the reward system was not working. And then there was the idea of the life after death as the reward for good behavior in this life. Dorothy Seol, an amazing philosopher, once said, "Some people experience such suffering in this life that no amount of happiness in the afterlife can atone for it." That was a really sobering thought for me to read. I also wondered about the idea that a God loves us and guides us unconditionally through our lifetime. But then at the point of death, it all becomes a tally sheet. And whether or not God cares for us at that point or punishes us is simply a numbers game. I really had a lot of trouble, as you can hear, with the idea of the Bible as a reward for action manual. I also began to have a lot of trouble with the Bible as read as an instructional manual for how to live. We would love to think that it is, and most places will tell you that. But the fact of the matter is that you can find in the Bible justification for owning slaves and justification for entirely abolishing slavery. You can find in the Bible passages that will say that women are completely subservient to men, and also passages that will say that women should be emancipated from that kind of oppression. You can find in the Bible, and I'm sure you can think of lots of them, passages which justify violence against our enemies. And then many beautiful passages which say that violence is never the answer. So as I say, for me, what Marcus Borg calls the earlier type of reading of the Bible as action and reward, the Bible as justification or an instruction manual, none of that reading of the Bible really worked for me. But Marcus Borg suggests that a new way of reading the Bible is now emerging. And this way of reading the Bible considers that the Bible is not so much instructions and that God is not about action and reward, The Bible is about something more profound, more valuable, and more eternal. It's about not information, but inspiration. It's a book of collected wisdom. It's a book of writings by people who have said, I experienced God in my life, and this is what it looked like. This is what it felt like. This is how it helped me. So the emerging way of reading the Bible is not about requirements. It's about relationship. It's about transformation. It's not about instructions for how to live. It's about possibilities of what we can be in the world and who God can be in our lives. I guess I would say that Marcus Borg might say that if you follow the more early way of reading the Bible, God would be saying, follow me, and I will give you prosperity on earth and endless life after death, if you behave. But the emerging way of reading the Bible would say, follow me, and your life may be hard, and you may face difficulties, but I will be with you every step of the way, and you will find inner peace, and you will know clarity, and you will grow in compassion for yourself and others, and you will be not rewarded so much as transformed, which to me is the greatest reward for spiritual work. So I'm talking about this because this is how I'm going to approach those 66 books that we're going to be talking about week by week to come. I'm going to be talking about them as wisdom, not as a cultural artifact, although I do want to talk about the history of some of these fascinating books and the characters in them and where they came from and who wrote them. But I want to talk about the wisdom that's contained in them. I'm interested to see how that wisdom is going to rise up to meet the circumstances that we happen to be living in week by week in our modern world. I am confident there are going to be times when I will be fascinated and hope I can share that with you by how this ancient book still speaks to the part of us that is ready to be inspired, that is ready to be opened to the surprise of God, that is ready to look beyond this limited idea, I think, of the Bible as an instruction manual on how to act so we can be rewarded, and rather the Bible as deep and everlasting wisdom about the connection between ourselves and the sacred, within and without. Augustine, in fact, may have picked up scripture to read, but he read it as inspiration, not as instructions. The passage he read said, "Look for Jesus Christ within you, and it will be more important than any of the things that you find in the world." It was transformation through connection, through wisdom, that catapulted Augustine out of his chair on that languid summer afternoon, that led him to suddenly want to live differently, to embrace Christianity not as a set of rules, but as a pathway to walk with God. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to walk a pathway with God through the Bible, step by step, book by book. I honestly think it may take us 2 years. We're going to meet Malachi on the way, and we're going to meet Habakkuk on the way, and we're going to find Mary and Joseph in a new way, but mostly we're going to find inspiration in every book. We're going to find wisdom in every story. And we're going to come out at the other end, just like Augustine, transformed, living God more fully, and ready to take on the world in a completely new way. So join me on this journey, starting today, continuing every single week, with time out for Advent and Lent and vacation. We're going to walk through the Bible, and we're going to come out transformed by the grace of God. Thanks be to God. God keep you. God bless you.